Baskerville Radio.
Hello. This is the audio commentary to accompany the science lesson Introducing Density. Not all solids are the same. In some solids, the particles are packed so tightly together that you get a lot of mass in a small volume. The very dense materials are useful if you want strength and hardness, such as in the iron used in the head of a sledgehammer. On the slide it's got a picture of the Titanic, which you will have heard of, and you might have wondered, how can a ship made of steel, a metal, with a mass of over 40,000 tons float? Okay, so hopefully by the end of this lesson you'll understand why. Slide 3. Density measures how concentrated the mass of an object is. So if an object has its mass spread over a large volume, its density will be low. If all the mass is concentrated in a small space or small volume, its density will be high. Next slide. Properties of solids. Solids have a fixed volume and a fixed shape. However, they can be elastic. This means that they return exactly to their original shape after bending or stretching. Solids can be hard. This means they will not easily change shape when a force is applied. Solids can also be strong, meaning a large force is needed to break them. This is because their particles are close together and held in place by strong bonds. It can take a lot of force to break these bonds. Solids can be dense. This is because their particles are packed closely together. This means that there is a large mass in a small volume or space of material. Some solids can have a lower density. A good example is aluminium, which is used to make aircraft. The advantage of this metal is that it has the hardness and strength of a solid, but a lower mass, which reduces the force needed to lift off. So, what other advantages, as well as helping the aircraft to lift off, are there in keeping the mass of the aircraft to a minimum? Well, we could maybe think about the number of passengers that the aircraft can hold, the amount of fuel that the aircraft uses, and so on. Next slide. Properties of liquids and gases. Liquids have a fixed volume but no fixed shape. So you can see in figure 4, if we pour a liquid into a different shaped container, it takes the shape of that container. Gases have no fixed volume and no fixed shape. So gases expand to fill the space available. They can also be compressed or squashed into a very small space. Next slide. Density and buoyancy. An object will float if its density is less than the density of the liquid it is in. Some types of wood are less dense than water, so they will float on water. Most metals are denser than water, so they won't float on water. Materials that float easily are described as buoyant. As a general rule, solids are denser than liquids and liquids are denser than gases. And you can see on the little diagram below, that's because solids have the highest density because their particles are closest together. Gases have the lowest density because their particles are furthest apart. However, there are some exceptions. Liquids with a low density can float on liquids with a high density. For example, oil floats on water. Gases with a low density will float on high density gases. That's why warm air, which is less dense, will rise up and float on colder air. Water is an example of a substance in which the solid is less dense than the liquid, so ice will float on water, and that's quite unusual. Next slide contains some questions. So, why are solids harder than liquids? You'll find the information you need for this question on slide 4. What would it mean if a solid was described as strong, hard and dense? And again, the information is on slide number 4. Question 3. Why is it an advantage to run cars on liquid fuels such as petrol rather than solid fuels such as coal or wood? Question 4. Explain why the density of a metal object decreases when the object expands. So, a little bit of extra information for this question. When an object expands, it means it takes up more volume. Okay? So, if you look at slide number 3 and think about what happens to density when an object's volume increases, you should be able to answer that question. And question 5, an object such as a rubber ring can be made to float on water by filling it with air. Explain using particle diagrams why this occurs. Okay? Right. Thank you for listening. Goodbye for now.
Baskerville Radio.